Alright, hey guys, I'm back, and let's just start off with probably what's the worst film of the year, or at least I'm not sure if you'll stay that way because a lot of these recent movies have been quite bad, I must say. I've been actually casually watching some B movies that are just far better than this, I don't know, big budget ones, can I say that? However, Morbius didn't really have the biggest budget of all the Marvel films, and I think Marvel really decided let's just do a film that's even worse than Endgame so people will actually forget about it and start talking about Morbius instead. Well, they definitely got people talking again. The marketing team did a great job of really putting this film out there to up to the hype. Not as much hype as Black Adam is getting from Dwayne Johnson. I think he's doing a much better job of just self-marketing the entire film. But yeah, regardless, Morbius it got many people into the cinema, and then it did gross a lot because a lot of people apparently did go to watch it, and it had a lot of people questioning their decisions shortly after because of just how bad the film actually was. Now, as you know me, I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man, and I've been reading the comics since the 90s, and yeah, Morbius is just one of those amazing characters. I believe he meets um, Spider-Man at the point where Spider-Man's actually evolving into a giant mutated human spider like person. He starts to grow another six arms or another four arms, and thus he ends up with eight limbs including his legs or something like that. And I believe there's some introductions of Cable, the Venom, all of these things sort of coming together around the same time. I can't really recall. I have to pull up my comics for that, but I believe it's around the same time where they try to stop Spider-Man collectively because Spider-Man turns into this giant spider-like creature, and it's quite an intense sequence. Even for the animated film or the comics for that matter. I think it takes place in both. But yeah, it's really intense, and Morbius is just a little part of it. But that's where I got to know his character. Other than that, I don't really know too much about Michael Morbius, besides just his basic backstory that yes, he tries to cure himself by turning himself into a vampire, and it works. But yeah, he is bound by the laws of some kind of a what do you call this, like a hybrid vampire. He's not like a real vampire. He's actually some sort of a genetically created vampire. So he's sort of a how can you put it, like a lab grown vampire because he's not a real one. It's not actually bitten by an actual vampire. So yeah, there are some rules that differ for him. So, as for the movie itself, we start off with the basics, sort of flashbacks in flashbacks of Michael Morbius just trying to get into close contact with these bats. And it goes back to the moment when he's still a, sort of a teacher. He's a very impactful scientist, develops a lot of cures for a lot of dangerous diseases. But he starts off in a childhood where he is unwell. He has a rare blood disease. He and his friend they are together in a children's hospital and they're not doing well. They're trying to recover. His friend, I believe, goes into some kind of an epileptic shock, I think, where his body starts to just go into a fit. And the machine that he's on, I believe, is not working. I can't really recall, but yeah, the machine is not really working. And Morbius decides to help try to fix this machine because he's been calling continuously for the doctors in a children's hospital, and apparently there's no one to attend to them. Very strange, but at the same time, it really does happen. I have personal experiences, and I've also known people to have experiences who are very close to me where hospital staff sometimes are just too busy in the ER or with something else, and they're just not there to attend. And especially in the older days, a lot of the times the audit and the hospital maintenance doesn't really check the alarm system, which is supposed to alert the staff so the patient can be pressing the emergency button beside them and it doesn't really trigger anything, and the staff can't hear the patients down the corridors because there's something else playing. So yeah, it can get really messy, but regardless, Morbius as a kid was brilliant enough to use like some kind of a spring from a pen to somehow fix the machine that his friend is relying on to catch his breath or something like that. So his friend is Milo, yeah, and Milo is actually a name that Morbius gave him. I can't remember his actual character name, but Matt Smith was amazing in that role. Jared Leto, of course, once again, amazing singer and yes, amazing actor. I think he's just been picking the worst scripts possible, and I think he just shouldn't decide for himself. Quite frankly, he needs a better agent, perhaps, to give him better film roles with better decisions. But if you look at the general cast, you have a lot of big actors still. I think Matt Smith, Jared Harris, especially, are really important actors. Tyrese Gibson as well. Huge actor after, especially after the Fast franchise, but he took a very interesting role in this one. But I'll get to that. So after saving his friend, turns out he is a certified genius. The doctor in the children's hospital tells him that perhaps he could use his intelligence to something better, and helps him join a medical school where he becomes a medical genius. He becomes eventually a biochemist, I believe, and starts working in a lab and develops cures for a lot of rare blood diseases, but can't seem to find a cure for his and his friend Milo's. He has managed to extend their lives for the greater good to a very, very long time, meaning almost as long as a regular human being, but he wishes to perfect his technology and he wishes to, somehow save him and his friend. And so he takes extreme measures. He wants to do an illegal experiment, which is by merging bat DNA with human DNA. So, what have we learned from merging DNA between two species? It doesn't go well for anyone besides Spider Man. So, they realize that it's not legal to do such an experiment on American grounds. So they take it to the seas, in open waters, free waters, where they can actually do this without being bound by too many laws. And so the experiment goes absolutely wrong. He turns into a human vampire, rampages, and kills everyone on the ship. But he spares the doctor that he's working with, Dr. Martine Bancroft, and she is the sort of the side character in this film that really gets left behind. She's nothing other than a damsel in distress. I wish they had used her a little better because of how much of a certified genius she is to be working with Dr. Michael Morbius, but yeah, they just didn't really go to that lengths. Regardless, Tyrese Gibson is acting as Agent Simon Stroud, who is one of the two agents, together with Agent Rodriguez, who are working together to try to solve the case of Michael Morbius. And it's really weird to see Tyrese Gibson take on a most serious role. And the more comic relief came from Al Madrigal, and they just don't work well together. I think one really good comedian who is put into a serious role, and another comedian who is his sidekick. It was just so weird from the get go, like their roles. And once again, Martin Bancroft just didn't really seem to have that important of a role in this film to be of any use. You can ignore Michael Keaton as Adrian Toomes of Vulture. He doesn't really have much of a role either. He just comes in an post-credit scene, which is completely irrelevant to the film. So Morbius, basically, after going on a rampage, continues to try to resist the hunger that is in him to feed off people, and uses his existing research and technology, which was this thing called artificial blood, and he uses that artificial blood to consume as his supplementary food instead, and therefore reducing his need to have human blood. However, it turns out that this artificial blood does not suppress his hunger as well as human blood, and he is eventually getting hungrier and hungrier as time goes on. So the interval in which he must consume artificial blood is reducing, and so once the interval goes down to a zero, he has no choice but to consume human blood, and so he's trying to look for a some sort of a way to end whatever he's going through, or seek an alternative. And so he meets Milo, who eventually realizes that Morbius may have found a cure, and wants Morbius to help him. He takes one of the what do you call this? The samples which Morbius used to merge into his own DNA, one of the supposed cures that he was developing, and Milo uses it on himself, and he becomes another vampire. So it seems like anyone who takes that little DNA sample thing that Morbius created can turn them into a vampire, and they become super powerful, super strong, and they get all kinds of powers in the world. So that's pretty broken. Like a lot of other superheroes, they have some sort of a mystical element to it, in the sense where it's sort of like a destiny. Like Barry Allen had to be struck by lightning, a thing that's nigh unpredictable. Spider-Man was the only one bitten by that spider. It's almost like the spider chose him. Spiders don't simply bite people unless they're really threatened, and this spider almost certainly chose him and died shortly after that process. Similarly, I believe a lot of other superheroes were in very, you know, specific moments in time which caused them to get their powers. But Morbius, in this case, his tool or whatever can just give Milo his powers. So it's kind of like a very, I don't know, maybe Destiny for two, perhaps. And so they end up becoming rivals against each other. The scenes where Morbius actually uses his powers and fights the villains and what's not is actually pretty cool. I really like it. But I felt it was very TV series level. It didn't feel like a very high budget film or whatsoever. But I think it's okay considering that perhaps the graphics of our time has forced us to think too far ahead and into how good exactly CGI should be in a film. But I reserve judgment onto it too harshly. But at the same time, I want to say that the CGI was pretty bad. It was cool to see a lot of these graphics and a lot of the especially the sonar or radar like vision that he has, where you can see these bat like frequency, like to sort of give him intel of the objects around him. I like that. That was pretty cool. Reminds me a lot of video game frequency like abilities. But at the same time, all of his other stuff and the CGI just didn't do very well. Really, really was bad. There's no other relevant or significant character in this film besides Milo and Morbius just duking it out to the final battle. There is another doctor that they do introduce that sort of was the guy who encouraged Morbius to become a doctor, and Milo also turned out to be quite a successful person. So that person is Dr. Emil Nicholas. He was not useful in the film in any way. Film comes down to a duel between Morbius and Milo, and they duke it out. They go just destroying half of some top of some skyscrapers. A bunch of people get killed, and that's it. A final battle where he has to, be the big guy, do some sacrifice. Martine dies because Milo attacks her and all of that, and finally he has to defeat Milo. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's how the story goes, and Morbius escapes. It's really anticlimactic. There's really nothing deeper to the story. There's no real character development where you feel sorry or sad for the characters at any point. Nothing really sinks in, and these two comic relief characters really had no role to play whatsoever. And also, the film had an hour and a half runtime, like a Disney movie or like a Disney cartoon, which does not help it in any way. It really did not help it in any way. And yeah, I think it really deserves to be one of the worst recognized films for the year. 5.0 rating in IMDb, I think is really very, very generous. I remember IGN gave it a 7, I believe. And knowing IGN, none of their ratings are ever true. They give 7 for a lot of films recently because I think they're starting to become very defensive. Oh, no, no, no. For Morbius, they actually gave a 5 out of 10. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think they gave a 5 out of 10 for Morbius. And I think that we were lucky. I mean, sorry, they were lucky because they actually got reviews from a lot of people out before, they could do the review. So they gave it a 5. Like if they had reviewed it prior to everyone else, they may have given it a lot higher and then regretted it. And I'm honestly saying this because I remember they gave the original Justice League by um, the one that was taken away from Zack Snyder, that Justice League, the Joss Whedon version. I think they gave it a 10 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 or something. Yeah, I think they gave it, no, wait, was it an 8 or a 9 out of 10, something like that, and they gave it really high. And then they were not very sure how to judge Zack Snyder's version. So yeah, it's really hilarious. But anyway, this is my rating, a 2 out of 10 film. The reason it's gonna get 2 points still is because, first of all, CGI wise and the fight and action sequences wise, I think it definitely deserves a point. I think these action sequences are pretty decent. I would have loved for this to be a TV series, to be more well fledged out, for the characters to develop a little better. For that, it definitely deserves 1 point. It really gets a -5, I think, for its mobbing time and all the other memes that have been coming out. But I'm going to give it 1 point for the memes because these kind of films are iconic bad films, right? this might be the Citizen Kane of 2020 plus films. And for that, I'm going to give it a point and give it the 2 out of 10 rating. And I think it deserves that. And yeah, this is a really good shot of Morbius's makeup and all that. And I think it's fine. It's not as bad as one would think. A 2 out of 10 I think is a pretty fair rating for this film if you ask me. I think it's definitely a film worth forgetting. Definitely one that you never want to watch again. Definitely something that I hope no one has to go through again because of just how horrifying and horrible it was. It deserves all the bad reviews, but then again, let's not take away the fact that it doesn't change how some of these actors are actually capable of, you can see that there is hope, right? There is hope for Jared Leto and there is hope for Morbius. It's just that it was done by probably a really bad producer, director, crew, bad decision making, bad script writing. Like everything was just a perfect storm that led to its downfall, and all backed up by what Marvel and Disney. I don't know if they even watch these films. Like, do they even watch them before they review them? They think, oh, it's an hour and a half. I think that's fine. Is it PG-13? Yeah, it's an hour and a half. PG-13. Yeah, go for it. Roll it. Yeah, I think that's all they care about, honestly. I really think they don't give a damn about the story or the character development or the acting or anything that's really noteworthy in films like these that should make a difference because of just how impactful superhero films have been in the past 2 decades. I think it's really important we don't, like sort of try to cover up the fact that these superhero films have been super impactful and anti-villain films too. I mean, sorry, anti-hero films too. I think have been super impactful. They really, you know, uh, get people absorbed and get people really talking. And I think it's important to send the right message and create better films and not ruin it completely. So yeah, anyway, I'm just bouncing back and forth between some photos and yeah, just going through stuff. So that's it from me for this one. I'll see you guys in the next. Please do let me know how horrible this film was, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.